My name is Nathan Patrick Hilton. Today I will be speaking on behalf of the Orchid team. Our chapters in the Friedman book are 8 and 9, and they're part of Part 3, which is known as The War on Math and Physics. Just a top-level outline of what I'll be discussing today. First of all, we're going to give an introduction to the wars on math and physics, which is all of Chapter 8, and also runs into part of Chapter 9. An explanation of the wars, which is part of Chapter 9, in both the past and the present. Some conclusions about them, and wrap it all up with a summarizing final word. Chapter 8, and there's just an introduction to the wars. America as a whole has underestimated the impact of globalization and IT, information technology revolution, and failed to respond to them. This is the war on physics and math. Just to expand a little bit on what the wars are, exactly what he calls these wars on math and physics. From the years 2000 until 2010, America basically ignored their deficit by spending and cutting taxes while being at war and taking loans from China, loans in the form of treasury bonds that China buys from us, and that we're eventually supposed to get back to them if they need to cash in the bonds, but may not happen. And then the war on physics. Simultaneously, while doing all the things discussed above, America ignored global warming by not investing in energy and science, in the energy and the science of climate change. And it's beginning of Chapter 9, actually it's also part of Chapter 8, a little bit of a misnomer. Just an introduction to the war on math in the future. America needs to plan to fix the deficit, reshape the budget, and invest in a formula for greatness. If not, we'll be the country without a future. And in the book, the author has a little quote here that's relevant to this section. It's from Touch of Evil, which is a movie from Orson Welles, I believe, in the 1940s or 50s, something like that. And in the book, in the movie, it's a movie about a crooked cop who wants to accuse his partner, and for some reason he goes to a seer, a woman who can see the future, and he asks her about his future and what's going to happen with him accusing his partner, and the seer says, quote, "You ain't got any future, your future has been all used up." And then some going into elaborating on a few problems that is the war on math. One of the problems with the war on math has to do with taxes and spending, yada yada, is whether we fund the elderly or the young. We need to fund the elderly with their nursing homes and the end of life, and actually the last year of their life is usually the most expensive. I think currently the book said we spend more on the last year of life in Medicaid than we spend on defense, national defense, something like that. And then you want to compare whether you want to spend on that or whether you want to spend on schooling, where you want to pay for education and Pell Grants and things like that. And just going further into the war on math, he calls this little section Paint by Numbers, giving some numbers about what's happened in the past. In the past, the government only spent what it made in taxes. And in the 1960s, the deficit started. By 2001, we had $5.6 trillion in deficits. 2011, that had over doubled to $14 trillion in deficits. We are now above 119% gross domestic product in debt. So every year we make so much money, and then that amount times 119% is how much we owe China. And that's actually more than we owed and more than was present in World War II. And searching throughout history, it's hard to find another example of something like this happening to any other nation ever. We're just extraordinary. And then another added problem with the parts of numbers, baby boomers will cause extreme rises in Social Security and Medicaid, just making other problems that I discussed before even worse as time goes on. And then we move on to the problem where we were borrowing money that I've discussed a little bit already. If you're, he argues that if you're borrowing money, it should be so that you invest in something. not so you can just spend that money right now. If you borrow money, it should be in education, so you can make more money and pay that back later. It should be in a house, so you have somewhere to live while you make money to pay it back later. You don't need to buy things like toys and cars and vacations, and that's his argument. And we need to know how much money we can borrow, and that's a little bit hard to calculate. It's based on how much we're going to grow in the near future and how much we can pay back, and that's a very difficult number to calculate. And if you go over that limit, you're in the same position as Greece, and he has another little comment here that's related to a book by Tennessee Williams called Streetcar Named Desire, and he says that we're going into debt by the kindness of strangers, which is something that happens in A Streetcar Named Desire. And something else that goes along here that was written in the book that's not on these slides is he talks about the deficit commission, current deficit commission of the president has a quote from them about borrowing from China and what situation it's put us in. It says, deficit commission stated, we have a treaty that says we have to defend Taiwan as if it is attacked by China, but we have to borrow money from China to defend Taiwan. And then a little bit about how our problems with the war on math have been around for a long time, and when they started really. In 1971, government ended the international monetary system created in 1944. This system tied the U.S. dollar to the price of gold and fixed international exchange rates. So basically, after they ended it, we could make our currency whatever we wanted it to be, and international exchange rates are supposed to be controlled by the market, the invisible hand of the market, but the invisible hand of the market never came. It also imposed fiscal decline on all the participating countries that were once part of this treaty, and it created a feedback loop, which I thought was kind of interesting since we were on controls class. And he said this feedback loop, as he called it, was based on devalued currency, which spurs inflation, and then inflation leads to higher interest rates, which then further devalues our currency, and that's the loop you get: currency, interest rates, inflation, back to devaluations. It was one of the presidents who ended this, and he ended it so he could fund the Vietnam War. And the deficits actually got much higher during Reagan's first term, but Reagan decided that he would implement revenue enhancements to counter this, which is what Reagan called taxes. He's famous for never implementing taxes because he called them revenue enhancements. And then another thing that has led to our current war on math, President Bush lowered taxes in 2001 and 2003 without any kind of spending cut, and Democrats didn't want spending cuts on top of that. And there were also 2 wars that caused a recession. And this is a little bit more about war on math. This is where the war on math, he actually starts calling it the war on math. Democrats waged the war on math on the state and local levels. What they did was they would pay for the pensions of firemen and other public employees. And then their unions would fund them in return, and that's not very nice. It doesn't really work out well in the end, and it caused a lot of problems. You can see why the math there wouldn't really check out. However, during the same time period, George H. Bush and Bill Clinton did 3 very good things to help fight the war on math. They supported an imposition of tough statutory budget controls. They did not expand entitlement programs like the ones that the Democrats did for firefighters and such. And they broke campaign promises over taxes when they saw the reality of the fiscal situation. They saw that they could not continue without increasing taxes, so they did it, even though they said they wouldn't. And then this is when it's going into the present and what's happening right now. For the past 60 years, mayors, governors, and presidents have given things to us, given tax cuts, given benefits, various things, and in the next few decades, these same officials will have to take things away from us. We keep spending as we are, and we are sabotaging our future as a nation. We must spend on the right things. And he actually compared this to weight loss in the book. He says that we need to, for instance, his example was if you cut education, it's like cutting off your fingers to lose weight. Yes, you're going to lose weight, but without fingers, you're going to have a hard time doing certain things to lose weight, like working out and driving to the workout center, things like that. And he talks about 4 guidelines to help us into the future to get over these war on math and physics. The need for seriousness, as he was talking about with George H. Bush and Bill Clinton, they were very serious about the taxes or the deficits, so they increased the taxes even though they said they wouldn't. And people who are saying that you don't need to increase taxes, the author argues that they aren't being serious. Know the purpose of your exercise. It's not just only to reduce the deficit, but to ensure prosperity in the future. You have to be aware that cuts have to be taken all across the board in education, in pensions, and other things like that. We cannot cut our way to financial sanity. We must also raise revenue with taxation. So we must use the taxes that we take to do things that implement revenue increases, like interstates for further commerce, things like that. A few conclusions that he comes to at the ends of these chapters. Cutting some programs and raising some taxes and increasing some necessary investments is what we must do in the future with our politics to overcome this war on math and physics. The mess that he thinks that the mess we're in right now can be fixed with an eye on the future. And at the very end of the chapters, he says something that I think summarizes the chapters very nicely. It's actually a quote from the Deficit Commission. This picture shows President Obama, Vice President Biden, and those are 2 members from the board of the Deficit Commission. And I think this quote that he takes from them summarizes nicely, and I'll end with this final word. Deficit Commission says that when we started our work on this project as the Deficit Commission, we said to ourselves, we're doing this for our grandchildren. And then time passed, and we had to say to ourselves, well, now we're doing it for our children. And then currently, they've come to realize, unfortunately, that they're doing it for themselves.